Hello, and a very warm welcome to the 2023 Alumni Briefing. My name is Jon Phillips, and I'm the chair of the Alumni Association Committee, which works to build and to strengthen our now 200,000 strong alumni community. As you might know from previous years, this event is an opportunity for Bristol's global alumni community to hear firsthand about what's going on across the university from today, our Vice-Chancellor and President, Evelyn Welch. And Evelyn, thank you so much for joining today, very much appreciated. Alongside Professor Welch today, I'm delighted to welcome Adam Michael. And Adam is the Union Affairs Officer at the Students' Union. I know that for many of you, the Students' Union will have been a formative part of your Bristol experience. So to have the opportunity to have you here today to hear about you and your team's work firsthand, I think is a real bonus. So thank you, Adam, for joining us and making time for this event. So this is an opportunity to hear from Adam and from Evelyn firsthand about all things Bristol. But this event is also a chance for you, our alumni, to ask questions. So when you've registered for the event, you may have already submitted a question for our panel, and of course, if you have done so, you may well hear that a little bit later. We've got some really insightful and varied questions for later in the proceedings too. If you didn't, or if something occurs to you throughout the session today, you are most welcome to join the conversation. Join the Q&A facility as part of the Zoom platform, and we'll endeavour to turn to your question before the hour is out. Some brief housekeeping too, if I may. This event will be recorded, and we will share the recording with you and with the wider alumni community in the coming weeks. I'll lead the panel in conversation today over the next 35 minutes or so, incorporating some of the questions you've asked, and then over the last 20 minutes we'll turn to any questions that you may well have. So, without further ado, Evelyn, Adam, I wonder if we can first turn to your reflections maybe about the first year. Now, Evelyn, I know you've marked the first year at Bristol already, which is incredible. A few weeks back, that milestone passed. I can imagine it was maybe a moment for you also to reflect and to take stock. So what would you consider to be the main highlights, the main challenges for you in the university over the last year?
Oh gosh, John, I'd love to say it was doing my alumni briefing with you almost this time last year.
Which category was that?
No, and it's fantastic to join Adam and I think the almost 200 people who are on this call out of the 200,000 alumni that the University of Bristol has around the world. So it's been a year and 2 months and 10 days since I started. Not that I'm counting, not that I'm counting down or counting up, and it's been absolutely extraordinary. Some of the extraordinary things I've inherited. So, for example, I had the privilege last October, November of launching Strategy 2030, the university's new strategy that will take us to a really ambitious place by 2030. And allied with that, and absolutely dependent for the delivery of the strategy, is the new campus in Temple Quarter, down by Templemead Station. And I signed the largest contract I have ever signed in my life in March with Sir Robert McAlpine. The foundations are laid. We're already seeing, if you come into Templemeads and look out, and you will see our new building, which will house our new business school, engineering, innovation sites. You'll see that rising up above the ground now. So incredibly exciting, but very much building on what my predecessors have laid for me. And I see myself very much as a Vice-Chancellor who delivers for the long term, not just builds on the long term. But if you may, just one other, given the alumni, I need to say this. I've met so many of you. I've travelled to all kinds of places, met alumni in Bristol, met alumni in London. The Wills Hall annual dinner this summer was fantastic, as I met not only Wills Hall alumni, but also Manor Hall, Churchill, Baydock, people from all over the United Kingdom, but internationally, for whom those hall associations are really, really important. Not to mention travelling to the African continent, to the US continent, and to Malaysia, where I met many alumni who are really keen to stay connected to the university, to their university.
been a brilliant, I'm sure, exciting first 14 months and, as you say, 10 days. On the other side, some of the challenges maybe that you faced.
Well, I could have used a lower inflation rate.
Indeed.
Our students could have used a lower inflation rate. And that put some tension into our staff relationships. We had quite a lot of industrial action. Adam will know all about the marking and assessment boycott. I'm really pleased to say that all of that has been, at least for the moment, resolved, and it looks like we won't be seeing strike action this year. Can't guarantee it,
Sure.
but it looks like we have managed to come to a good place with our staff so we can all come together to deliver for our students. And clearly everyone on the call will be aware that the geopolitics of the world impacts here in Bristol. People feel very acutely upset and understandably angry about what's taking place, first in Ukraine, but also now in Gaza and Israel. And we have to create an environment in which people can express their views freely, but also feel safe and supported. And I'm really grateful for all the work that the Students' Union is doing with us to create that atmosphere where we can have complex conversations, difficult discussions, but remain aware that we are all part of a university community who look after each other.
Fabulous. And a beautiful segue. And Adam, you were elected as Union Affairs Officer last year, re-elected, in fact, for a second term. Many congratulations on that. As a former sabbatical officer, I understand something of the role too. So well done. What would you say has been your highlights of the last 12 months?
Thank you, John. And I gotta say, it's a lot of many different things. But I would say that the SU is potentially seeing its best year in recent memory, as engagement with our activities and events are recovering since the days of the pandemic. Our Welcome Week program was met with a very encouraging level of engagement, with most of our events sold out before the start time of the event, and our Welcome Fair attendance shattering the number of attendees from the previous year. Going beyond the numbers, we're also seeing more engagement from our diverse range of international students through new events that are catered for them, such as the Ramadan Bazaar that was run right here in the living room. And it was an effort that aimed at integrating our international and local students through the best form of culture sharing, food. And speaking
I went to the Malaysian Society.
Good.
Fantastic food.
Yeah, it was really good indeed. I must shout out to my friends in Malaysia. And speaking as a full-time officer, seeing more engagement with SU activities and opportunities warms my heart and tells me that the work that we do as a Students' Union does bear its fruits. Something that I had worked on alongside Pat, our Sport and Student Development Officer, was the tripling of the Activity Hardship Fund. And thanks to working with our colleagues at the university, we were able to accomplish that. This not only means that more students get to benefit from the fund, but it also means that these students can get more out of it, as we were able to increase the cap for the maximum application amount. This was a long overdue increase that was exacerbated by the cost of living crisis, which remains a major priority for the SU, the officer team, and for the university as well. We're working closely with colleagues from the university on a number of efforts, some of which have already been accomplished, such as having cheap food options on campus. And with other efforts like the Housing Guarantor Scheme, we're making a lot of progress, and we're working hard to get where we want to be with it. And coming back to the road to recovery from the pandemic days, seeing a return to in-person events has been very encouraging for us. As I mentioned earlier, our events program has been seeing very good engagement from students. And I'm looking forward to also seeing an upwards trajectory in the attendance of our democratic events. Student Council is just around the corner, about a week from now exactly, and this is when student leaders from across campus come together to debate and vote on the SU's position on issues that are dear to them, which influences what we do as a union. This is especially important for me, as I'm currently working alongside colleagues at the SU on a review of our democratic and representation structures. Academic representation in particular is something I'm very passionate about, and I want to use the opportunity presented by this review to ensure that student voice is embedded in the academic structures in a way that is helpful to both students and colleagues at the university.
Great.
That's really good to hear. And as I said, as a former sabbatical officer, always delighted to hear the vitality of the Students' Union coming through in your reflections there. If I can, just jump to some of the challenges too. What have you seen, what's been on your plate that's given you maybe a few sleepless nights too?
Yeah, I think therein in what I just said is also lies the challenge.
Yeah.
Embedding student voice is a process that must involve a diverse range of student voices, and I'm sure you all agree with that. This becomes a balancing act of meeting deadlines with the review and engaging with as many student leaders as possible. The student leaders that are in position at the SU are some of the most inspiring people I've had the honor of working with, but they're also juggling their roles with their degree, with their masters, and add to that the impact of the cost of living. This isn't an insurmountable challenge, however, as I formed a select committee of student leaders alongside the chair of student council to lead on student consultation for this project. Furthermore, as you mentioned earlier, the higher education sector is faced with reactive issues which deserve our attention, certainly, but also unfortunately affects our capacity to work on projects, industrial action, global conflict, and the possibility of a general election incoming are issues which are very important to our students, but also will result in an effect to our capacity.
Yeah. Well, good luck meeting those challenges. I'm sure you and the team are beautifully well equipped to deal with those. Let's turn to some of your priorities. What's on your plate, Adam? Again, what's the union going to be working on as a set of priorities for the next 12 months, maybe?
I think there's a lot of them. I'm going to cover a few here. I think the SU officer team this year remains committed to working on the cost of living crisis as well as mental health and well-being, as these are areas that remain a key concern for the student body. We've also included academic experience this year as a collective priority, seeing as issues such as industrial action and the demand for study space become more and more of a critical problem as time progresses. This is where the SU and UEB have come together to deliver on these shared goals. Together, I imagine more of these goals will be achieved and will also mean a better continuity of work when officers finish their term and a new team comes in. As far as my own personal priorities, aside from the review that I mentioned earlier, I will continue to work with Pat and other relevant university colleagues to eliminate barriers to participation in student groups and opportunities, especially seeing how well the students have responded to the uplifting of the Activity Hardship Fund. I'm also focused on integrating groups together and building an environment of culture sharing. Diverse groups of people coming together is what builds community and a sense of belonging in our university. And I intend on encouraging this through continuing events like the Ramadan Bazaar and introducing even new events that aim to meet this goal. The Sport and Student Development Officer and I are currently working on a World Cup tournament that is set to happen in January, and we're aiming on using sport as a means of building an integrated community of our students. This is a key focus for us, and I'm confident that these events will lay the foundation for it.
Amazing to hear, and I'm sure that there are many tens of thousands of people on the call right now maybe who will reflect that the Students' Union is the heart of the community that they felt as a student at Bristol. So thank you once again for continuing with that. And Evelyn, I'd like to turn the question exactly to you as well. With the Christmas break rapidly approaching, maybe I'm the first to mention Christmas. Thank you. What's on the top of your mind for you and for your senior team for 24?
So as Adam has said, we have been able to almost contract between the university and the Students' Union to really focus in and try to deliver in a way that this crop of students will benefit, not just students 5 or 6 years from now. Everything from a £1 soup and roll to a £2.50 warm meal. So really important that hot food, warm places, that we ensure that this graduating class, first year students, master students, wherever they are in the university, that we make sure that they feel the university is looking after their well-being. And one of the things I've been really struck by is the importance of what we call extracurricular activities. So as Adam says, sport, drama, music, these actually are the ways that many of our student communities are formed. These are the friendships that are formed outside of the student residences, outside of the class. So really looking at how we integrate our own understanding of that student life cycle, not just through the classroom, but through the 24/7 lives that they lead. On the flip side, on the research side and civic engagement side, we have just, and anyone who watched the AI Summit last week may have picked up that the University of Bristol has been chosen as the site for the nation's first supercomputer for AI. It's an incredibly exciting opportunity for us. We have to deliver it at speed, but we can because of our expertise. And where I think this is a real opportunity, not just for us in research terms, but also in terms of industry engagement.
Absolutely.
And entrepreneurship, because the speed of the computations that this computer will be able to deal with will really be transformative in terms of the jobs of the future, but also in terms of really understanding how we make AI something for all of us, not just for the nerd in me.
Yeah, and I think there's something of the reputation that comes with the story of AI that you've just talked through. I was only catching up on a podcast as I drove here today, and Bristol University was mentioned on that podcast in relation to the AI investment. It's absolutely amazing. You've both mentioned the importance of the student experience and how you've both felt that that's a key priority for you over the next 12, 24 months for some roles. It's somewhat of a broad term. I think we can all recognize that. It covers everything from how a student feels and that sense of belonging at Bristol, all the way through to academic contact, to accommodation costs, and much, much more in between. So a question for you both, and maybe Evelyn, I can turn to you first. What do you feel is going well in this space, and where are you most focused on those improvements?
So I'd say the collaboration, don't contradict me, Adam, please. The collaboration with the Students' Union has been outstanding. And we can hear early on the ground issues before they become crises and intervene. So mental health and anxiety, and that sense of, how do I succeed at university? Those issues are skyrocketing. And our approach continues to be try to get in early. Try to ensure that students know where to go to get help, but also that students feel able to help each other before it becomes something so serious that you actually need a counsellor or the NHS. So we're working on that. Always more to be done, but absolutely has to be done in collaboration with the Students' Union. But pressure on students is real. And the thing, I sleep very well at night, by the way, John, but if I didn't, the thing that would keep me awake is as the economic pressures on students get tougher and tougher, because it's not just the tuition fee, which has been eroded by inflation, it's also the maintenance grant. A maintenance grant that was set in 2010 is no longer able to purchase the kinds of basics, rent, food, warmth, that students need now. So we have students who 6 or 7 years ago might have had a Saturday job. Now they're working every evening and all weekend. And that means they're not able to participate in those union debates, in sport, in music, the things that really create long-term friendship. So we do have a hardship fund, but it's highly stretched and there isn't enough to go around. So we are working with other universities to ask the government to revisit the maintenance grant, maintenance loan, so that students can actually do what they do best, which is be a student here at the University of Bristol.
Thank you. And Adam, turning to you on that reflection about the student experience, what do you think you're going to be focused on, and what improvements do you foresee?
I think we've responded with urgency to the issue of the cost of food on campus by bringing back the low-cost meals, which students have responded to positively last year. While this on the surface is only one facet of the cost of living crisis, it is, in my view, one of the most essential and quickest to have in place, as you mentioned. This also mitigates the cost for students who have to travel from further parts of the city or even Newport, as they have an alternative now to meal prepping, which may not always be feasible, and they can have hot food that is cheaper than a meal deal you can buy at Sainsbury's or anywhere else in a local eatery. When students can afford to eat on campus, odds are they're more likely to be on campus.
Right.
And as we've established, returning to in-person and giving students the opportunity to engage better with us, whether that be through contact hours with academic staff or being part of the student community, is a key focus. And I think we've done well there to make it easier for students to be on campus. For all campaigns and projects across the SU, we try and think more holistically about the experience of students when engaging with SU activity, whether that be on-the-ground surveys or accessing events across campus. We're trying to ensure that there are different opportunities for everyone to enhance their experience. And what needs the most improvement, in my view, also before that, like I do echo, the collaboration we've had is really positive. What needs the most improvement is accommodation, I believe. It's an issue across the UK. And in Bristol, we have seen year-on-year compounding of the impacts of low quantity and poor quality housing options for students. At the SU, we have our SU lettings, which makes big steps in improving landlord provision and options for students, but are limited to the properties listed under their banner. More students each year coming to us seeking help with accommodation. There's little we can do at the moment to help them. We do see a way forward that mitigates this issue and are currently working on it with colleagues at the university. We're aiming to implement a guarantor scheme which will significantly ease the problem for international and widening participation students to secure housing, as well as the placement of a private accommodation advisor to give students the guidance and advice that they need to navigate the private housing sector.
Bravo. I want to stress, because I think it's important, that I think the student experience leads to a good alumni experience too. And that brings us quite neatly, I think, onto alumni contributions to the university. Evelyn, you mentioned earlier that you've met a number of alumni in the last 14 months or thereabouts, and there are hundreds, as you know, of volunteers now who are supporting students, recent graduates, through mentoring, speaking events, industrial placements, and much more. And I just want to thank those who are contributing in that way, because it's an incredibly valuable way of giving back to the university. So maybe, if I can, a question for you specifically, Adam. Where would you like to see our alumni contributing their time to supporting current Bristol students?
I'm sure you're aware, John, that working with the Alumni Association has been one of my favorite parts of the role that I'm in.
I hoped so.
Bristol's alumni do a lot to support current students and continue looking for other ways that they can help, whether it be through helping them with career and industry experience, grant funding, or mentoring current students. Bristol Connects, which is the online platform for students and alumni, continues to grow and becomes a very helpful resource for current students. I've been discussing with the wonderful colleagues over at the Global Engagement Division, I believe it's called now, on how we can expand this offer and increase its presence among the student community. Apart from that, alumni have also been increasing their presence with student groups at the SU by helping student leaders through a Training to Lead course. This is done both formally and informally, as I'm also aware of alumni who continue to maintain contact with student groups that they were part of as a student and continue supporting them for years and years on after they graduate and leave Bristol.
Yeah, I think we've reflected on it, but when someone comes to Bristol, they find that connection, their emotional connection point. It might be with the Students' Union, it may be with a club or society, a sporting club or society, for example. And I think you're absolutely right, Adam. I think a lot of people maintain those connections. I know there are some clubs and societies now who thrive on the fact that it's alumni who are leading a lot of the work there, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So thank you, I very much appreciate that. Evelyn, I'm not sure if you have any reflections on the volunteering or the opportunity for alumni to connect back with the university.
Well, the alumni groups have been absolutely core to what we're doing around creating our new Bristol Business School.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So colleagues will be aware that the accounting and finance and management schools have come together to form the new University of Bristol Business School. We're in a soft launch phase, but we're really trying to think, why does the world need a new business school? And the alumni, whether they've been in London, here in Bristol, in New York, in Kuala Lumpur, have given us such amazing feedback. Particularly when I was out in South Africa or in Malaysia, the notion that we need to internationalize our business curriculum, that we need to understand that business that's done in Asia is done in a very different way than it may be done in London. And making sure that we have that global perspective is something that the alumni have absolutely reinforced. But we've also had some amazing examples. So in New York City, one of our alumni said, well, when I was learning leadership training, obviously there were lectures, there was the theory, but the thing that really taught me how to be a leader through a business school was the chance over a weekend to try to conduct a choir and actually get all members of choir to sing together when they'd been obviously told to really mess around and make it as difficult as possible for me. So we have a fantastic music department, and Veronica Hope-Haley, who is our new inaugural dean for the business school, is busy talking not only to engineering and to colleagues in innovation, but also to the music department, really thinking through how we draw on having astonishing skills across all of the University of Bristol. So if you've participated in those business school conversations, thank you. You've made a huge difference. If you'd like to participate in those business school conversations, please do contact the Alumni Association.
Amazing. And you reflect there, Evelyn, on the global story of alumni in the University of Bristol, but maybe I can turn the tack to a slightly more local and a civic story as well. And at the start of our conversation, you mentioned the university's positive impact on the city of Bristol, and I'm not unusual in the fact that I was a student here, but I'm now a resident of Bristol, so I'm seeing it from both angles, indeed many other thousands of alumni as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the university's civic mission, and specifically what it means for Bristol to be a civic university.
So when I started, my kind of signature line was, and I still use it, that I want us to be not the University of Bristol, but the University for Bristol. Because what I found was that, like yourself, many of our neighbours, colleagues, businesses are incredibly proud to have the University of Bristol as a major employer, as a major contributor to the city, along with the University of the West of England. But they just wish we didn't have so many students, our students weren't so rowdy, that our students knew how to understand how to recycle properly,
of course.
And that could they please come home quietly on a Saturday evening and not wake them up as they come through the streets. So there's a genuine tension between being the university for Bristol, but also working with residents' associations, with working with our student body itself, to understand that this is our town. These are our streets, and we need to collectively and collaboratively work together to create community, not just a wave of students coming in and a wave of students coming out. And that's a conversation that I have regularly, and sometimes not entirely amicably, as residents accuse me of all kinds of matters, as it were the mother of 34,000 students, and who should keep them under control. But I get it. And actually, it's really important that we contribute positively to our neighbourhoods, to industry, to enterprise, to just transitions in terms of climate change, all kinds of things that we really can do, but we need to do them in collaboration.
Yeah, and as someone who lives in the city throughout the entire year, you can obviously notice when our students are not here, but I mean that in a negative way too. It's a hole in our city when our students are not here. They are absolutely the beating heart of particularly what goes on in core parts of the city, such as Clifton Redland.
And if I just come in briefly, Jon, I was in a taxi in Bristol going to the station from the Clifton campus in late August, and the taxi driver said to me anxiously, "When are the students coming back? When are the students coming back?" 40% of his business was students.
Wow.
So it really is important to have that life. but just keep it down on a Saturday night when you're back in a
try my
residential
best.
neighbourhood.
So as much as Evelyn is the mother of all 34,000, it sounds like you are the guardian of all
I'm the big
34,000
brother,
as well. Yeah.
Big brother. Yeah.
So Adam, I imagine the way that Bristol students interact with the local community and local charities maybe here in Bristol has changed quite a lot since I was a student. So I'd love to hear more about the ways in which our students are interacting and being part of the civic story in Bristol.
Yeah, I think with the largest student numbers that we have today, as well as the growing diversity of our student body, the first thing that comes to mind for me when you mention this is the richness that our student body brings to the city. Bristol's already a city with a diverse background of people, with a rich culture that spans beyond the areas where our campus is generally located. Having lived in different areas of Bristol, from Hotwells to Stapleton Road, I can say that Bristol boasts diversity like very few places in the country. Add to that over 10,000 international students from all over the world, and we also have with us the cultures of the many countries that our students come from, right here in Bristol. And in the past year alone, we've seen our students perform the Lion Dance for Chinese or Lunar New Year, have a massive Langar celebration, and a grand iftar in the Great Hall of the Wills Memorial Building. That's precisely where the opportunities lie in the future. As the University of Bristol grows into a more global international university, we must empower our international communities not only to make them feel at home at Bristol, but to also make Bristol their second home, integrating into the civic community the vibrance that they bring.
Fabulous. It's been very, very interesting listening to you both talk about the global story, a civic story, to hear more about the challenges that you're both facing and the opportunities I think that exist for Bristol into the future. So thank you once again for a wide-ranging and very honest conversation. I'm going to turn now to some questions and use that time to reflect on some of the points that I guess have been raised by our audience today. I have a colleague with me from the alumni team who's supporting me, managing the questions and working them through, and I can see that we have one question right in front of us, and I'd like to start actually one for you, Evelyn. One member of our audience asks, why is the university trying to grow so fast? And a question then of balance, and maybe it reflects somewhat on the conversation we've just had. Should there be, or there should be rather, is more direct, there should be a balance between the city and the university, and is this growth concerning? Evelyn, your thoughts?
So I would imagine some people on the call will remember the University of Bristol when it had more than, let's say, 10,000 students. We're now over 25, 30,000 students. That actually makes us a mid-sized university for the UK, not a large university. And until we have Temple Quarter, we're actually stabilising our growth. I suspect that what's happening is that our students, and Adam talked about this a bit, are now spread throughout the city. So the impact on streets, on residences, etc., isn't just concentrated, let's say, up in Stoke Bishop or in the Clifton area. It is throughout the whole area, particularly as housing becomes more and more expensive and housing for multiple occupants becomes scarcer and scarcer. So we have a lot of our students down in South Bristol now, and we even have a number of students who've chosen to go to Newport as a cheaper, better value option. Is it concerning? Well, we're constantly thinking, how do we create that sense of community?
Yep.
When you're a small institution where everyone bumps into each other, it's just easier to make friends. It's just easier to resolve local conflicts. It's just easier to move about and to know who you are and get that sense of belonging. As we spread throughout the city, and particularly as in 2026 we open our new campus, we're going to have to think in a more structured, more formal, more deliberative way about how we create those relationships, both between students and other students, but also students and communities. What's so interesting is that, like you, many of the people who actually end up living and working full-time in Bristol are ex-University of Bristol students. And sometimes they feel very sympathetic towards today's students. Sometimes they are really cross why aren't those students like we were in the past?
Of course.
And managing that conversation is fantastic, actually, because when you bring alumni and students together, there's almost always something that they can find in common.
Fabulous, and I absolutely agree. And you know, the strength or the size of the university, and Adam, to your earlier point about the diversity and the strength of diversity within our student body as well, is possibly something behind the question here for you, Adam. Our caller asks, or our writer in asks, what is the university and the student union doing to ensure events are run for all students and making sure that they are inclusive for all? Adam, any reflections there?
Yeah, thank you. That is an excellent question. The Student Union's year-round events program is intentionally designed to reach and engage a wide range of students, from sporting events to movie nights, non-alcoholic socials, and smaller craft-making events. We're committed to ensuring there is something for everyone. This is reflected in our Welcome Week program, in which I had the privilege as an SU officer to attend many events. In that week alone, I attended a yoga session, a friending meetup, a multi-faith meetup right here, and an international students karaoke in the span of 48 hours. You can guess, you know, I probably sang like 3-4 songs that one night. We've had lots of feedback in our welcome survey, and I even received lots from students in person at the karaoke event that they really enjoyed our offering of fun evening and party events, but which aren't club or alcohol centric. Of course, I don't question that there's room for improvement. That's why we send out feedback forms after every event. So we're told if we're doing a good job or if something isn't working well enough.
And if I can come in, one of the things I've been very struck by, and this will be different from when you were here, about 15% of our students, when they start, tell us that they have some form of disability. The majority of disabilities are neurodiversities, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc. And it means that we have to think about space and activity, lighting, sound, in a very thoughtful way, making sure that there are quiet events, making sure that there isn't a kind of harsh lighting, making sure that you give people time to think through what it is they want to do, how they want to interact. And so it's not just physical disability with ramps and for wheelchairs or deafness, really understanding the diversity of the way people respond to information and how they absorb it. It's new to us. We're working through it, but there's still much more that we can be doing, and I'm really grateful to, there's a student union group called the Bristol Student Union Neurodiversity Group, or BUNS, their society, as they're known, and they're absolutely fantastic, and don't hold back when they think we haven't got it right.
It's really heartwarming in a way, I think, to hear of students being engaged in that kind of important lobbying work, which actually serves their student community extremely well, but ultimately I would hope serves the university incredibly well, because you're able to learn from that and to develop that as well. That's great to hear. Evelyn, a question here for you, and again, I suspect somewhat sparked maybe by current affairs to some degree. What is the university's policy on freedom of expression, and how are you ensuring that this right is not infringed?
Really good question, and very topical. Not just topical because of the current geopolitical events, but actually has been topical for almost 2 years. You'll all be aware that the UK government has passed a higher education bill, which not only says that universities must protect freedom of speech, not freedom of expression, they're slightly different, freedom of speech, but also must promote it. And there is a new lead in the Office for Students for freedom of speech. Student unions, for the very first time, are included in this legal obligation. So over the past 18 months, almost 2 years now, we have been working through not just a policy on freedom of speech and academic freedom, but all our policies. How is the promotion of freedom of speech included in our promotions policy? How is it included in our admissions policy? So how do we ensure that colleagues know that within the law, and it's really important that this is within the boundaries of the law, that they can have opinions, test out opinions that might not be fully shared by communities with whom they're engaging. I've argued throughout that we spend a lot of time talking about freedom of speech. We don't spend enough time about freedom to listen. Not everyone has to listen, and indeed if you want people to listen to your argument, it's best to make it in a way that actually is of interest to them, that engages them. Whereas we seem to see freedom of expression, freedom of speech as a chance to shout and enforce attendance.
Yes.
While we shout. Shout less, listen better.
I was always told that you should be curious and not criticize, and you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that proportion. So I absolutely agree. This is a fascinating question which has just come in, and it reflects, I think, a little earlier you were mentioning the AI story, which is both a global story and really pleasingly, it's a Bristol story as well. So a question for you both, and maybe Adam, I can turn to you first of all. How will the university respond to the challenges in the student assessment I'll start again, of student assessment in the era of ChatGPT?
Right. I'll admit that first of all, I am not the most well-versed in AI and ChatGPT, especially as it relates to student assessment. I normally look to the undergraduate and postgraduate education officers to be experts in these areas.
Of course.
I do know, however, that the emergence of ChatGPT does add consideration to student assessment that was not here before and sits in the context of huge technological advances and impacts over the last 30 or so years. In whatever way ChatGPT potentially challenges academic practices, I believe that the SU does have a role to play in helping students understanding the due processes. The academic advice team at the SU have been my heroes since I was a student that wasn't even aware of what the SU does. And they do a lot of good work in helping students understand about plagiarism and other issues, alongside supporting students with appeals when they do make mistakes.
And Evelyn, I'm sure this is the subject of many a meeting, so I'd love to get your perspective.
So ChatGPT, and we're already on version 5, is a large language model that doesn't think.
Right.
And that's really important. But it is brilliant at knowing what, statistically speaking, the next word ought to be. So it can actually produce fun poems, it can produce short paragraphs, it can produce code. It's really excellent at that. And the way it's been described to me is like a first-year university intern.
Okay.
You know, that you have to explain 3 or 4 times how to make coffee properly. You have to explain at least 5 times how to use the photocopier, and that you can't assume that it knows anything, because it doesn't. So teaching it and teaching students how to use ChatGPT is part and parcel of what we need to do to prepare students for the future. It will get better. It will change our lives. It will change the kinds of jobs that Adam and others do, because it can take minutes really well. It can write a first draft of something reasonably well, as we will know from the screenwriters strike that's taking place in the US at the moment. It's particularly good with visual imagery and in terms of reproducing things. So it will be a tool that will be to our advantage, but if we don't teach students how to use it, when to use it, why to use it, but above all, what lies behind it, then actually we're not preparing anyone to go out into a world where it'll be one amongst many of the tools that we use. And ChatGPT is only one of the many ways that artificial intelligence or machine learning will make a difference to our lives, but it's the one that our students can turn to most. And it should be said that it's not plagiarism, because it literally makes it up.
Yeah.
Sometimes inventing the footnotes and inventing the bibliography as well. We really don't recommend that students use it to write their essays for that reason.
Yes, in my day job, I'm using these kind of technologies a lot, and it's an increasingly interesting challenge for businesses too, to understand how to get the very best out of those technologies. But I think it's exactly right. It's a word of caution to understand it at its core and at its base, to understand how best to deploy those tools, I think, as part of a day-to-day. Thank you. This is a really interesting question again, Evelyn, if I can direct this to you. What is the spin-out strategy of the university over the next 5 years? And maybe there's an AI thread to that one too.
Well, there's actually a quantum thread.
Very good.
A quantum thread which is connected to artificial intelligence, but is not one and the same. So I didn't know until I arrived that the University of Bristol produces a third of the UK's quantum spin-outs. Incredibly impressive. We've been working in the quantum area in our physics department for generations, and a lot of the most influential actual quantum, not necessarily quantum computing, but quantum chips, which are used for things like putting in a headset so that you can see whether there's been macular degeneration on a daily basis at home, because of the speed of the calculations, a bit like the AI computer that you're able to do, but in a tiny chip. Absolutely extraordinary. So our spin-out strategy is really simple, is to make it easy for our staff to translate their research into enterprises. Students as well, but it's primarily PhD students who do that. And we have a whole range from licensing the IP to actually creating companies. Sometimes we take a stake in a company, sometimes we just provide the support. We have a wraparound program through something we collaborate with other universities on called Set Squared. It takes place down in the engine shed or here within the university to really help. And this is where alumni can be such extraordinary mentors, because they can work with students and with staff to say, okay, this is why you need a finance director now. Now, you're the scientist, you need a CEO as well. Or if you're going to be the CEO of that spin-off, here are a few things you might like to consider about how you hire other staff, because a physicist may not be a natural chief executive. We have created something over the past 18 months called Bristol Innovations, and Bristol Innovations now is the wraparound community for entrepreneurship, spin-outs, but also potential investments into some of our growth companies. We have some amazing success stories, the most famous of which is Harry Destacqua and Zyla, PhD students who found a molecule related to diabetes, $800 million of investment buyout from Novo Nordisk later. I'm glad to say that Harry is still here in Bristol. Amazing. And has set up innovation activities through Science Creates, and we're working in close collaboration with him. Really exciting part of the Bristol story, and not one that's well known enough.
I would second that. I think there's some really exciting things come out of it, and I think it's an opportunity, isn't it, to show the global story of Bristol, the success of our students here, but also to build the reputation of the university alongside. So yeah, absolutely. It'd be also, I think, very interesting to see how the growth of the business school can also impact that story in due course. Yeah. This is a question for you both, and actually, Adam, it was something that you briefly touched upon, so I suspect that may have sparked this question to some degree. It's about first-year students, and it's about accommodation specifically. Are first-year students still having to live outside of Bristol for their studies within the city?
In short, yes, there are students who are living in Newport, but I think the number has decreased over the years. We saw a high number of students who are living in Newport who are requesting switch over to an accommodation in Bristol if that's possible, but I would say at the very least they are being housed at the moment. There's no bunk beds that they are forced to stay in. So yeah, over to you, Evelyn.
So it's a really interesting question, because I came from London, 20 years in London, and when we had increases in student numbers, we had many challenges at whether it was Queen Mary or King's, but accommodation was never a problem because the city just absorbed the student population. And here in Bristol, we have enough accommodation for all students who have a guarantee. In fact, we have some spare beds at the moment. So we're really, really cautious about the offers that we make. We put Newport on the agenda for students, not because we needed the beds, but because we needed affordable beds. Yep. So I think Adam has really put his finger on it, and that it's not the lack of housing, although that's under pressure, it's the lack of affordable, high quality housing. So students will go across the city, sometimes having to travel for up to an hour, but in London that would be the norm, in order to find something that is is safe, clean, dry, warm. You would think that those would be things that could be guaranteed, and also that won't eat up 100% of their maintenance loan. And we have to work together to create more, because it's the volume of housing, good quality housing, that's needed. On the other hand, Bristol City Council and local neighbourhoods are saying, well, do I want to actually have another purpose-built student residence here? So it's not straightforward, but we need to work together to manage that.
Yes, it's an interesting challenge. Forgive this because it's going to feel like a short essay as I read, but actually it's a really important question, and I understand the sentiment behind it. So Evelyn, this is directed towards you. This is related to the Temple Quarter campus, which you mentioned. Why is the Temple Quarter campus a priority for the university? And shouldn't those funds be better suited to increase students' quality of life, subsidised meals, better access to the very housing that we've just described, or indeed to increase lecturers' pay to avoid the UCU action? So there's a multifaceted story in this question. I wondered if you could try and tackle that for us.
Sure, and there's a lot in that. Let me break it into two parts. The first is, and it's often put a kind of buildings versus people.
Of course.
Let me take that, and then me actually talk about the investments that we're making in the people side. So Temple Quarter is a priority because Bristol is a relatively, as we said, relatively small university that is very comprehensive. If we want to keep that comprehensive nature to it, we need to be able to effectively finance it. We have borrowed the money for Temple Quarter. Anyone who's borrowed money will know that you don't use that money, or you shouldn't use that money, for daily living costs, because as soon as that borrowed money is gone, you have to go out and borrow some more. Yep. You need to invest it in order to grow the funds that you need for your daily living costs. So Temple Quarter is an investment to allow us to grow, to continue to be successful, to continue to support students, to continue to have the facilities that we need for amazing research, amazing education, amazing civic engagement. We would never use borrowed money to pay for cheap food. We have to use our own income for student support and for staff pay. We are, just to reassure you, as you've heard from Adam, investing with the help of our Students' Union in the things that students care about most. Alumni support us to do that, and the donations that alumni make towards student bursaries, absolutely essential in terms of what we're able to do to support that student community. In terms of staff pay, it's a national pay bargaining. Pension has been resolved, which I'm really pleased about. And while we can't do anything about national pay bargaining, we are reviewing with all three of our unions the pay spine. And that is actually going really, really well. So, but we need to make sure that we invest for the future, because when Adam graduates, I want him at the end of a supercomputer AI-enabled webinar with the Vice-Chancellor 30 years from now saying, and what are you doing about student support? And that investment for the future is for everyone.
Our last question, and it was briefly up on the screen for us there, but it was about the story of COVID and how the university, like many organisations, pivoted at that particular point. And I wondered if you had any reflections since that time as to how the university has maintained or adopted or accelerated through that time.
And Adam, you really made the most important point about being together. I'd say for our students, COVID was not a happy time. It disrupted education, but above all, it disrupted friendship. So what we're seeing is that students want in-person activity, in-person education, a chance to come together to do anything from dancing to karaoke, and I wish you'd give us a song as you as you finish now. And that's what they want. For our staff, actually we've learned that we can do conferences online. We don't need to travel as much, and we don't necessarily need to come and use our offices on a regular basis because working from home turns out to be quite pleasant. So there are some tensions between that student desire for in-person, absolutely whatever it is, I want to be there, staff busyness, and needing to kind of juggle their time, and trying to create that strong sense of a campus community. We've learned a lot about Zoom fatigue. So thank you to everybody who's stayed with us to date.
Thank you, Evelyn. And maybe a very quick reflection, Adam, from the Students' Union perspective.
Yeah. Sure, I'd just like to echo what Evelyn said about Zoom and all that. But I do think there's still one benefit of online conferences like this that still are implemented to this day, and it actually even benefits alumni engaging with student groups, especially with our international groups where we have international alumni tuning in from all over the world, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia. I know of a lot of events that allow alumni engaged that way, career talks, industrial experience talks, and even just sort of catching up and linking back together with the student groups that they were part of. And being conscious of time, I'll stop there.
I reflect, of course, that COVID was an impossibly difficult time for many, but it's always encouraging to hear some of the reflections you've just shared there about what can positively come out of such a process and the changes that we're hearing to student life, to staff life, and to the university itself. So thank you, both of you, for that. We are approaching 6 p.m. So on that note, I'd like to draw this event to a close. Thank you so much to you both, Evelyn and Adam, for your thoughtful contributions, I should say, and the conversation this evening. And of course, thank you to everyone who was kind enough to submit some questions to us as well. We are very grateful for the audience joining us, and very grateful for your input. As the chair of the Alumni Association Committee, I feel I ought to, however, briefly, I promise, really encourage you to keep in touch with Bristol and ideally join us for another event in the not too distant future. You can find all the alumni events listed on the alumni web pages, and of course, if there are physical opportunities to be here in Bristol, I'm sure you'll grab those too. I know even between now and the end of the year, such a short period of time, there are events in Zurich, London, Cambridge, Beijing and Shanghai, to mention a few, and of course also back here in Bristol as well. So thank you once again for joining us this evening. We very much appreciate it, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye for now.
See ya.